want to say hello to people.
Hi. Hi there. I see Andy. Hi. Hi, Andy.
Hello. Hi, this is Laura. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Laura. I saw Jerry a few minutes ago. Hi, Jerry. And I don't know who else.
That's all we saw was Jerry and Andy. I hope this goes better than one of my Zoom meetings.
Hi.
2 more minutes before we start.
That's fine.
Hey, how are you?
Real people in a
Real?
real office, real space.
We took them off because we were distanced.
You're good. Now we're.
And I see her all the time in the car together.
We've already poisoned each other.
We do the same thing here. So.
Any poisoning that's going to take place has already taken place.
People are
Well, this
already,
place was a mob scene earlier today.
it's been this way for now 5 days.
I hope you have a reserved parking space.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
Today, yeah.
mob.
Well, I keep getting asked if I'm here to vote, and I keep saying, nope, I'm going to vote on election day because there won't be any lines.
My general plan is I'm going to vote on election day too, even though I'm here. But
I'm a traditionalist. I can't do.
there's a lot. There'll be a line here. I think pretty much always. I don't think we'll get away.
We don't vote here. I don't vote here.
Hmm?
Are we voting at our normal polling
You can.
places?
No, I meant if you vote early, if you want to vote before November 3rd, there'll be a line here, probably continuously. Always at least a few people on the line, basically.
I'll vote at the elementary school. Off the Meadows.
Mhm.
There isn't usually much of a line there to begin with, and so this time with all this early voting.
I think there'll be some, and it takes longer to vote here because the process is they have to go to the state voter registration database to pull your name up, and then
Hi, everyone. This is Laura. I'm just going to wait 1 more minute or two for a couple people to pop on. I'm checking emails to make sure if we have any last-minute technology issues. So I'm going to start about 6:35.
Okay, fine with me. Good. Oh. Yeah, I've always been.
Am I on? This is Bob.
Hi, Bob. It's Laura. I'm glad you're on.
I can't believe it. Actually,
Miracles do happen.
they do. Hmm.
All right, we're going to start at 6:35. I'm waiting for a couple more people to hop on.
there's not much. I was going to just mention to her about tomorrow.
Hi, can anybody see me, hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Barbara. Yes, we can hear you. This is Laura.
You might tell people that it works better with Microsoft Edge than with Chrome.
Yeah, there's always something with these technology programs. Yeah.
Background you have there, Bob.
You like that? It's I'm having a pretty good time here.
I'll wait for Laura to.
I don't know how people that work in stores wear these all day. After 20 minutes in Safeway, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm more used to it because in my business, it's a medical dental practice, we wear them all the time, so. But not when I'm socially distanced and all that. So when I'm in my own office, I don't, but most time I'm running around, so.
You have to take a breather.
All right, everyone, it's 6:35. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Nick, are we waiting for one more person?
Yeah, we're waiting for Mary Tracy.
Okay.
I don't have her telephone number.
I do. I'll call her and see if she's on the way. She's habitually late. Don't tell her I said so.
You're only being recorded, Millie, but it's
Oh,
okay.
good. Well, it's the truth. I guess the truth doesn't
I'm
hurt.
gonna go ahead and speak because then she won't care about what I have to say anyway, so. That's pretty much what
You
she'll
know
tell me.
Mary.
She'll tell me that, yeah, she'll tell me that anyways, I mean, it's like, okay.
That's perfectly fine. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, or if you can mute yourself while you're not talking, that way we can reduce the amount of feedback. But if you have a question, we have people monitoring our chat function over on the right, so just feel free to type in some questions in there. And let me know or flag me down if you have any issues. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody and then unmute you, Nick, at the supervisor's office. Okay. And unmute myself. Okay. All right, Supervisor Stork, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Look, I'm just here to do a 1 minute. Thank you. Welcome back. It's been a long time. We've obviously been waylaid by a virus that's kind of waylaid all of us, and it's kind of changed and actually changed what is even our new normal. But I want to appreciate everybody coming back and taking the time. This is, I know, a very important responsibility, a very important kind of conversation in the community that we're looking to bring to a conclusion in the next year. So that's what's coming. I wanted to introduce formally Nick. For those of you who haven't met Nick Reinhardt, he's our new land use aide. He's been with us 4, 5, 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
6 months. He took Anna Smith's place, but Nick's off to a great start and has been very involved with not only this, but a lot of land use issues, and I'm confident he'll be able to work well with you all. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Nick. He is our office representative, but he's really, if in doubt, email, call Nick, and he can connect the dots or find out whatever it is that you need and try to address it. Some key things just to note going forward is that we have two intended dates for the historic overlay process. One is that we are looking to try to do a community meeting in January. I know when I say that out loud, people are going, really? Well, we are going to try to do it. We think we can do some combination that will hopefully give everybody an opportunity to say the piece, but nothing's for sure in this COVID age, but that's the intent, is that in January we'd have a community meeting and we'd have a number of conversations that would take place likely after that. But the draft design would come from the consultants, the EHT traceries. They're going to tell you about the consultant that they've been using to help us put this together. And then we would follow that on with public hearings later that year. So I would expect that sometime in July and September, for sure, July for the Planning Commission or others who may need input, for sure, or likely at least the Board of Supervisors. I'd like to have this come back to the Board of Supervisors for whatever it is we're going to do. I'm not judging it, I'm just saying that would be the timeline that I would look for. If it slips, it slips, but the objective is to try to bring this to a conclusion. And I'm looking at September 2021 to do that. So we have almost a year to finish this process up, which to me seems more than enough time. And I think it's in our interest to try to bring this home with whatever the conclusions are that this work group, as well as ultimately, and maybe most importantly, the community would feel is the appropriate conclusion to this. I want to thank Laura and Lily and Leanne. They've been working very hard on this and on some other historic overlay stuff that we've been working with them on, and they're doing a great job. Not only the virtual part, but the in-person. They both have been essential to us. We know this is a new normal, so we're going to be doing combinations of this. We can see that here, some virtual, some in person. I think we're in a good place. We've done a lot of work, but now we need to kind of let's restart where we've been and then move whatever forward that this committee will want to bring forward to the community. Whatever that is, the community will have an opportunity, obviously, to discuss and debate it, and we'll have enough meetings to give people an opportunity to have their say, and ultimately we'll look for the community to essentially to vote on this, and from that, ultimately I'll take that vote as truly a recommendation as to whether or not we should proceed or not. I'm looking for substantial community support for whatever it is that we would move forward with. And with that, I will, unless there's any questions for me, I'm going to turn that over to Nick and Laura, and you all are great.
When you mentioned you're gonna look to have a community vote, is that after the final community meeting?
It would be I think, Laura, you're gonna go through the timeline on that, because I think my sense of that was it's in the kind of the late winter, spring timeframe.
I was going to go through the timeline at the end, but we can do a little bit now. The hope was to give the community something to review. So we were going to do the survey in the summer after we have the authorizations moving forward, so the community has something full to look at, and then we would do the survey at that point. So we would have the staff report completed with all the information at hand, and then trying to get some input from the community on whether they support the historic overlay district or not.
And I'm sorry, Laura, that was about, well, generally on that timing was about when?
I was going to say that on the schedule, it has July of 2021 going to for the zoning ordinance authorization. So that's when the staff report has to be completed. So sometime after that in the summer.
Okay. So there'll be a lot of conversations before then. Everybody's going to have a good idea before then. Not even a good idea. You will know before then what it's looking like. And then
Correct.
At that point in time, we would go something formal to the community. So it won't be a secret. Even when it comes out to the community, it wouldn't be a secret. It'll be just, at this point in time, we need the community to weigh in. House by house is what I'm looking for. So
you're looking for an overwhelming majority, not a simple majority?
It's not, a simple majority would not be enough for me. That's correct. I don't know where that line is. That's why I'm not qualifying it, but I'm, I would expect that we would get, in my mind, I would look for at least something with 60% or more, and how much more, I don't know. I'm not being specific because it really, a lot of times depends on where people are.
60% is
There's some people
break a
that
filibuster,
are
not
never
an
going to win.
overwhelming majority.
What?
60 votes breaks a filibuster. It's not an overwhelming majority. 60%, that's right.
I didn't say that's what I need. I just said I would look for at least something in that range. And I think the core of it is, oftentimes there's a break point about anything you do. And if the break point is, low, then okay, maybe it doesn't work. If the break point is high, then you go, okay, well, that's not even, I don't even have to think twice about that. 80+% of the community wants to do that, and that's just where we are.
Got it.
When you say community, do you mean the deeded property owners within the HOD, proposed HOD, or you mean the broader community of businesses and people?
That's actually defined by the HOD, so Laura could define that more specifically than I can. It's really what we started with in the very beginning. There's very specific numbers on that, and I'll defer you back to her as to what that would encompass.
It would probably be the community plus immediately adjacent properties to the community, as well as any other larger groups that we would like to send it to. But we can determine that list at a later time.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Supervisor Stork? You can unmute yourself with the space bar or using the unmute button before he steps out. Okay. All right. Hearing none. Thank you, Supervisor Stork. Appreciate your time. All right. For everyone else, just a few housekeeping things. I'm going to do a quick roll call in a second, but for those of you that have not used WebEx before, you can mute and unmute yourself with the mute button at the bottom and or stop your video. You do not have to have your video on the whole time, as well as you can use your space bar to turn on and turn off your mute button. So if you just need to say yes or no real quickly, then you can do that. I will say that as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded, and then it will be posted on the website, on the Hollin Hills HOD website for future. Hold on, let's see. Just make sure, once again, if you're not speaking, to mute yourself so that there's not any additional feedback. And then for those of you that are in Supervisor Stork's office, just kind of raise your hand or wave at me or Nick, give me a shout if you have any questions. We can figure it out that way. So I'm going to do a quick roll call just to make sure we have the people that we need here and to introduce you to some staff that's here as well. Hold on one second. I'm going to go alphabetical order, but of course, because I have you by first name in my Excel sheet, it's alphabetical order by first name. So if you would just say that you're here and then just state where you are, say whether you're on the WebEx or whether or not you're at Supervisor Stork's office, just for the record, that'd be great. So I'm going to start alphabetically. Andy Height.
Here on WebEx.
Thank you, Andy. I have Barbara Ward.
Here on WebEx.
I have Bob Kinzer.
Bob is here. I can see a picture of him.
Hey, Bob, can you speak
Oh,
now?
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Bob. Elise Murray.
Here on WebEx.
Thanks, Elise. Jason Zellman.
I'm here on WebEx.
Thanks, Jason. Jerry Giver.
Here on WebEx.
Thanks, Jerry. Kay Orr.
I'm here on WebEx.
Thanks, Kay. Mary Tracy, is Mary there yet, Nick?
She's not.
Lee? Okay. All right. We'll fill her in when she comes. I have next is Mike McGill.
Sketch.
Okay, he's not here. And then Millie, I know you're there.
Mike McGill is here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is he not?
Fine, but I know that I can see his picture.
Oh, there he is.
Hi, Mike. I unmuted you. Are you there?
Yes, and I want to know where Bob Kinzer is. He's getting a spectacular background.
I think we wish we all were at the beach right now in Barbados or wherever that may be. Thanks, Mike. Millie, you're there. I saw you. Ron McCallum. Hey, Ron, it looks like you're signed in twice for some reason. If you wouldn't mind signing back out and signing back in, maybe we can stop some of that feedback. Just a recommendation. We can wait till you come back in a minute. And then Lee, I know you're in Supervisor Stork's office as well.
Yes.
Okay, so we're just waiting on Mary. If she decides when she comes, just let me know.
I called her.
Okay, that's okay. We'll see when she's here. So I'm here. I'm at my home on WebEx. I have Lily Yegazu, who's with the Zoning Administration Division. Lily, are you here?
Yes, here on WebEx.
Thanks, Lily. I have Kira Davis, who works with me in Planning and Development. Kira, are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Kira. I have two people from Supervisor Stork's office. I have Nick Reinhardt and Christine Marin. Is that correct?
That sounds correct. I'm here.
Christine.
Okay.
She's calling.
I'm here too. I'm on WebEx.
Hi, Christine. Thank you. I also have three of the consultants from EHT Tracers here. I have Sarah Vonish, Laura Hughes, and Catherine Wallace. If you guys would chime in real quick.
Hi, I'm here.
Laura's here as well.
Catherine's here as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. And I think I have, oh, Cherie, I forgot Cherie. Cherie Halyard with the County Attorney's Office. Are you here?
I am here. Hello.
Hi, Cherie. Thank you. And I think the only other person I might have is Patrick Kelly with the Hollin Hill Civic Association. Patrick, if you're here, just quick hey. Okay, I see he's logged in. Oh.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi. So I have the members of the work group here and some staff here, so you can see everyone that's here. Thank you for everyone for coming tonight. I appreciate it. We're going to start with traceries, and they're going to give a presentation on the draft design guidelines. Thank you for everybody for sending your comments to us ahead of time. That helps us kind of hone in on what we need to work for, but look for. But if you did not, don't fear. We will have many, many meetings on this. Sarah, I'm going to go ahead and give you the presenter role, if that's okay, and then you and Laura and Catherine can go ahead and give a short presentation.
Great, thanks.
Are there any questions? Sorry, Sarah, one more thing. Is there any questions before we start on this? Okay, well, let's just dive into it, Sarah. Thank you.
All right, and Laura's going to get started.
Great, thank you so much. We're very happy to be back with you talking about the design guidelines and to give you an update on where we are and a glimpse of the draft design guidelines. Next. This is how we've organized our presentation tonight. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction, a little bit of background and an update where we are. And then Sarah's really going to take over and discuss the rest of the presentation, really the heart of the design guidelines. I think we talked about this in the very beginning, but we wanted to reiterate really the project goals and the desire to create user-friendly and graphically interesting new design guidelines. And there'll be a tool that will help the Department of Planning and Zoning and the Architectural Review Board review applications in the continuing preservation of the Hollin Hills potential historic district overlay. And that's really important. Oh, sorry, Sarah. That was very important that they be very graphic, have a lot of updated photographs, and are very easy to understand. And so that's sort of been our goal throughout as we've been developing the drafts. Okay. And so this was our initial scope of work, and we have been following the scope of work as best we can and the schedule with a few delays just because of COVID and inability to sort of do some of the community meetings that we had originally anticipated. But we're very happy to be here back on track tonight. Next slide. So this was our initial scope of work, and it just shows you the steps that we've been able to undertake and sort of where we are right now, coming back and meeting with the working group. We've conducted all of our background research. We've done our site visits, taken our photographs. We've developed the draft template, and we have a draft design guidelines. And so we're really here to get feedback and your edits. We greatly appreciate you all know the community and know what is important to have in these design guidelines. And so we're very happy to be talking about your responses here tonight. And this is the schedule, and you can see we're sort of right in the middle, I guess a little to the right of the middle of the entire process. And throughout October, November, we will be continuing to develop and edit the design guidelines and coordinate with the ARB and staff and Hollin Hills working group to really finalize and get the design guidelines where they need to be. We'll continue to seek your input throughout the rest of the remaining steps in the process.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Vonish. I'm a preservation specialist with Traceries. And I'm just going to walk through the guidelines document and the outline. I know you all have reviewed it, and we greatly appreciate your comments. We got some last minute, so I'm still reviewing those comments, but we'll be sure to incorporate and address them in subsequent drafts. But I'm just going to go through each section and give an overview of what is included in each section, and then we can follow up with some question and answer and discussion topics. So the purpose of the design guidelines, again, is to provide project applicants with recommendations for treatment strategies. It's developed to give contextual historical background and practical guidance, but not to restrict or discourage thoughtful approaches or new design. The guidelines are based on the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and those are the standards that the ARB uses in their review process. So that's where they come from. Again, the intent is not to stunt innovative design. They're not meant to be absolute or give case-specific advice. Instead, they are aligned with preservation standards to help applicants design and execute projects that protect and preserve unique and valuable historic resources in Hollin Hills. And sometimes a creative, thoughtful design solution, but not necessarily one that fits the guidelines or one that's not addressed in the design guidelines, will result in a project that's approved by the ARB and is consistent with the overall goal of the design guidelines. So here's the outline of the document. And I'm going to just start with the introduction, which gives a background on the potential historic overlay district and its purpose, the regulation and project review summary, and then just a guide to how to use the design guidelines and what they can and cannot do. Chapter 2 addresses the development history of the historic district and the statement of significance, as well as like a timeline and a summary of the subdivision and site development patterns. This is followed by Chapter 3, which gives you a historic overlay district overview, which discusses the boundary, the contributing and non-contributing resources and what that means for users of this document. And it also identifies character defining features that are really intended to be preserved as part of any project going forward in the development. So there's just some images of the documents showing the character defining features and how they're pictured throughout the document, and some more. We discussed some alterations and new development that were observed, and the typical Hollin Hills unit plans, those are still in development, so you probably saw 1 or 2 examples, but still to provide users and owners with an understanding of their house and where it falls in the history of the community, and the important aspects of the homes that should be preserved. So then Chapter 4 is the district-specific design guidelines. They're meant to complement the overall Fairfax County HOD design guidelines, which are currently being developed right now with the county. So it's kind of a part 1 and part 2. Part 1 gives you overall guidance on what requires permit review, what kind of materials need to be submitted to the ARB, and just overall design principles. Whereas the second part, the district-specific design guidelines, really address this community and the design features of the community. So it includes a discussion of the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. As I mentioned, that's what the ARB uses in their review. Guidelines for preserving architectural character. If a project is, if there's repair or replacement or just adaptation of an existing building. Guidelines for new construction and new additions, including general principles for maintaining compatibility when adding these new elements. And then guidelines for landscape, streetscape, and archaeology, since that's an important part of the character of the district as well. So this just lists some of the building elements that are included in the design guidelines. They address the foundations, walls, exterior cladding, roofs, just the important features that often that you see and that you'll have projects on, and there will be historic preservation considerations for those aspects. So this is followed by the appendix, which will have a glossary of terms and acronyms, and we're still working on that. I know there were a couple terms that people, I noticed in the comments, wanted more information on or clarification, so those will be developed in the following months. Additional resources, including links to the Secretary of the Interior standards and guidelines, and then the list of contributing and non-contributing resources, which will be brought in from what staff has been doing. So that's it. So now I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss any specific elements of the design guidelines. I don't think we need to touch on this since a number of us have touched on upcoming meetings. So I'll open it up to the group.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for that overview. Before we open it up to the entire group, were there any overarching themes you noticed from the feedback that you got that you wanted to start discussion on, or would you prefer me to go through each member and ask them for their specific comments? I would defer to you.
Sure. Well, I'll just note a couple of the recurring comments, a number of comments about the infill of porches and additions. So that's a comment that we can discuss. Another was the replacement of front doors. And trying to think of others. Maybe, some other people might want to jump in, but I just want to hit this home that the guidelines aren't meant to be restrictive. They're formatted to give recommended and not recommended treatments. So the recommended treatments follow those treatments that are in keeping with the best preservation practices. In not all cases, that's going to be required or feasible for a project. And so it's really just giving a framework for what kinds of work are typically recommended or not recommended. It's not set in stone. So I just wanted to point that out. There were a lot of comments about having a fabricator replace particular elements of a door, and it's not meant to be so restrictive, but if you have a historic door, generally the Secretary of the Interior standards, you would maintain and preserve the historic materials that remain, and replace only when it's too deteriorated and replace in kind. So I don't know if you want to jump off from there and open it up.
I would say I would try to defer to our co-chairs first, which is Barbara Ward and Lee Cutler, and then we can open it up to everyone else if that's okay. And I'll go through each member so that everybody gets an opportunity to talk, because I know on the virtual platform it's a little bit difficult sometimes when we talk over each other. So Barbara, if you don't mind going first, and then Lee will defer to you. Go ahead, Barbara, when you're ready.
I had a number of comments. I guess one of the things that a lot of people did not understand was why there was a problem. There did not seem to be a recognition that these were not expensive or well-built houses when they were originally constructed. As a consequence, over the years, there's had to be some pretty wholesale replacement of items. We are not talking about antique doors made of, a maple wood or pine, or some other rare wood. We're talking about cheap doors. You don't preserve cheap pieces of whatever because it's not worth it. And there doesn't seem to be a recognition on your part that many of the elements of these houses have had to be repaired or replaced on a wholesale basis, given the type of structures that the houses were. For example, my front door is completely gone. The veneer is completely kaput. It cannot be fixed. It cannot be sanded down. The door is 70 years old. The only thing you do with this door is throw it out and start again. And there doesn't, I don't know that you understand that about this. Or about, for example, you suggest using the same glass. You'd freeze to death if you use single pane glass. People haven't used single pane glass in this community in 40 years. You wouldn't buy a house that had single pane glass in it. And in fact, most of the glass that is now installed has a low E factor in it, a slight tint, because that raises the insulation level. I got to tell you, the people in this community are not willing to give up those quote unquote amenities for the sake of being an historical district.
Well, we'll certainly take another look at the design guidelines. I know the issues with materials and fabrication are a common issue with mid-century modern design and construction. I think the guidelines defer to preservation of historic materials because they are based on the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Wait a minute, you just said an interesting thing because you said that the guidelines defer to the use of historic materials, but our houses were not built using historic materials except for old brick. Our houses were built the cheapest way they could possibly find.
And I think the guidelines do say if preservation is not a valid approach, then replacement with a like door design that fits in with the community and the design of the historic district is often a accepted and approved approach. So
all right, let's step back then for it. I do not need a building permit in order to replace my front door. That means I can replace my front door as I want. I don't need to go to the ARB. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Laura. That's correct.
So the other thing that I noticed throughout these guidelines that was in many instances, you're commenting about things that really will never reach the ARB. Is that because you have to meet some Secretary of the Treasury guidelines in order to achieve historical status?
The guidelines do cover topics that don't require a permit, but generally just to provide guidance for undertaking projects in a manner that's consistent and preserves the historic character of the district. So everything in the design guidelines does not need a permit, but the guidance is there as a homeowner is starting work on a project or looking to replace something, just as a guide.
One of the things that you say in the guidelines is that you're going to be using or adding on some additional properties in addition to the homes in the residence. What additional properties are you adding in?
These are the, these are the park properties, the Park Authority properties in the historical overlay district boundary. So it'll be Hollin Meadows near the elementary school. I forgot the name of the park to the north. I apologize.
Lost you, Laura.
That would be the Park Authority properties. That's not, we're not doing, I don't think there's any structures on those sites in additional, so it would just be the additional properties is what we're referring to for that. I don't think there are any structures on those properties.
Why is Hollin Meadows Swim Club in this? They have repeatedly told you they do not want to be part of the HOD. They're on the map. Laura? Hello?
I think Laura's having an audio difficulty, but getting.
I'm sorry, I'm back.
She's
my
back.
headphones battery died. I'm sorry.
Laura, why is the Hollin Meadows Swim Club included in this?
Hollin Meadows Swim Club is not included in this. It's just the Hollin Meadows Parkland. Let me pull up a map.
Hollin Meadows is the Hollin Meadows is included in the map.
On the map.
I can pull up the map, but the Hollin Meadows park area is included in the map, not the elementary school and not the swim and tennis club.
I'll note that we don't have to start parsing maps. The other thing that I mean, we haven't had much discussion about this issue, but the other thing that one of the two other things is I have a strong preference that we not show any houses with X's. I think that is
X's.
It is showing almost like, don't let this happen to you. Houses where you say, this is the wrong way to go about it, and then you show somebody's house.
So they're not recommended actions, correct?
Right, yeah. I think that's sort of it's offensive. The house is there. People take a lot of store in their houses. You all are homeowners, you know that. Nobody wants to look at this and see their house pictured as the, you know, this is wrong or this is not good. That's just a non-starter. In addition to that, could you explain what you mean by the concept that a new addition should be different, differentiate itself from the existing from the existing house? Because one of the things we have always striven for in Hollin Hills over the last 70 years is that properties should be part of the home. There shouldn't be a great distinction between the old and the new. We want it to be a continuation. Now, sometimes, obviously, in most houses you can tell, but I don't even know what that conceptually means, that the new should be distinct in some way from the old, yet still meet all the recommendations. I mean, how many things are people supposed to try and design for at once? Can you explain?
The language differentiated is a pretty traditional standard historic preservation language when you're talking about additions. And so that can look like maybe a change in material to mark the addition, or a change in orientation of the windows. The windows could be a different style.
No, 1,000 times no. You can't, that is not going to work. We're not going to have windows suddenly. The benchmark of these houses is the windows. We're not going to have people coming in and putting in round windows. It's not going to happen. I mean, that's an anathema to this community.
Right. So I was just trying to explain what.
I understand, but you haven't explained in this document, and this is something that could lead to great subjectivity And it's an amorphous standard that is not enforceable.
Barbara, these are, I understand your concerns about that, but these are guidelines and recommendations that are to be used by homeowners to have a kind of expectation of what to look like, but also by the ARB and taking into account the significance of additions and stuff that go on. So for additions, as we were talking about, for example, the additions could have similar windows to what's existing, but differentiated in the fact that they, don't go from floor to ceiling or have wider panes or something like that. And those are already existing in the district.
They already exist, but we fight against them. I'm the chair of the DRC. Trust me, we don't like people coming in with windows that do not conform to what the existing Hollin Hills windows look like.
Well, this is architecture by its very nature is subjective. And that's why we're having these recommendations and having these conversations. The principle about being, we call it a new addition that's compatible, is that you want to know that it's addition, and you want to know, it's an addition, and you want to know that it's not original to the house. So like they were talking about, having a different materials, having a slightly different roof line. But that's up to the designer and on a case-by-case basis. That's not to be,
It seems to me that you're ignoring 70 years of Hollin Hills history in making these guidelines, and that absolutely no thought or consideration has been given to the fact that Hollin Hills has a 70-year tradition of of design review guidelines that have enforced certain standards and that the community has accepted for 70 years. And you're throwing out 70 years worth of history.
This is
That's the community.
This is a separate process from the DRC and from the Hollin Hills Civic Association process. This is a separate review, and we're taking a stance at it, we're taking a look at it, and that's why we're getting your comments. I understand there are separate comments and reviews for the Civic Association review, but this is what we're looking at for our review and our analysis. So we can take it up and keep going, and your concern is valid, and I understand there's a lot of history on here, but we're taking the characteristics that are symbolic of the community and using that as a starting point. We're not throwing, them completely out with this. We're just saying that they need to have some connecting attributes that relate to the original Hollin Hills. But once again, it's subject to what the ARB thinks would be appropriate. And that's what these recommendations are trying to aim towards.
What was the objection to porches? Can you explain that?
The objection, I'm not sure if there was, or Sarah, I don't know if there was an objection as much as there was a concern for porch. Is it porch design or is it porch review in general, Sarah?
Was enclosing the porches?
Enclosing?
Porch is by definition enclosed.
No, not according to the county permit process. So a porch and a deck.
In this neighborhood, we have so many mosquitoes and so many ticks. More and more people are coming to us, telling us, and I know you're sitting there saying, but it's the ARB, you can explain it to the ARB. You will never sell this to this community unless there is a sort of come to Jesus moment when you all understand that this neighborhood has a history. And you cannot just throw 70 years of design history out.
The definition of an enclosed porch is an addition in the county. It's not a deck. A deck would be an open porch. So they have different setbacks and different requirements according to the zoning ordinance. We're not throwing that out. We're looking at one, if you have a new one, you're coming, and Barbara, what's your concern about if someone wants to come in to enclose their deck and having an issue with that?
Yes.
Okay.
The design review committee got a request for that just last week because the people are being overcome by mosquitoes and ticks.
It's a pretty common building request. But if they came into the ARB process, they would have to go through zoning regardless and meet the building permit
I understand
requirements.
that.
Okay, and then what would happen is they would take these design guidelines, apply them to their project, and come to the ARB for additional comment and review on the design of it. So the roof shape, the height, things like that, color, materials, things like that. That would be the extra review. Without the historic overlay district, there would be no ARB reviewing requirements. So they could just enclose the deck with any design that they would feel.
Well, they would still have the design review guidelines to go by. But
correct.
Your
that's a
guidelines
separate.
seem to indicate that porches are disfavored. Enclosed porches are disfavored.
Barbara, I'll go back and take another look. I did receive comments from other work group members. So perhaps this is something that we come back to you with some revisions and to discuss further at a later meeting.
Okay, I've taken up enough time. I think some other people have comments, so I'm going to step back. Go ahead.
I just had one question about these enclosed porches. Are we talking about screening in porches, or are we talking about enclosing porches and turning them into an indoor permanent addition?
They both, Barbara, I'll defer to you, but from the zoning ordinance, they both meet the definition of an addition. So anytime you're enclosing a porch or raising anything above the railing, it's considered enclosing. So an enclosed porch would be an addition, or livable area would be considered an addition. Lee, I think you're up next. I want to make sure we get some comments in from you as well as co-chair.
Could I comment on one of the things Barbara said?
Can we wait 1 second, Ron? I'm going to go through everybody, but I just want to make sure Lee gets a chance. I appreciate it.
Okay.
This porch issue, I'll address that first because I remember reading about it, and I know one of my neighbors has done this. That area in some of the houses that is a porch-like area with a storage shed opening up into the living room space, which makes a stunning change to the house that is really in line with the idea of Hollin Hills being a laboratory of modern design and development. And I think that's a horse that's already left the barn. I can tell you several people who've already done that. You know, I think that Hollin Hills, as Barbara said, was built as an affordable option for people with materials that were less than, you know, intentionally historic elements. And in Hollin Hills, is my opinion, is that, you know, we should be concerned with people having a reasonable human comfort habitation environment. And with certain materials that dissolve over time, that were never intended to be historic or to test time itself, it's only reasonable. I mean, we have houses that have no insulation. We have houses that have no air distribution. And these are very serious issues that can be dealt with and brought in line with the idea of a laboratory of modern design. But when we have to listen to things like go root around in dumps for stockwood doors, and that's an exaggeration, but that's kind of what some of the verbiage implied, or refit old casement windows, it just doesn't seem to be consistent with something that's reasonable at this stage. And the horse has already left the barn on so many levels. That's not all I have to say.
Thank you, Lee, for that. I will say, as Sarah mentioned before, the first goal for the rehabilitation is to use in-kind materials. But if that's not feasible, there are alternative methods. It's just the discussion would start with, you know, have you looked at, okay, well, you can only find them in, you know, in the dumpster, or it's cost prohibitive to change that, or to use those. A good example is slate roof. You don't have any of those in Hollin Hills, but they're very expensive.
No, but we've moved from plywood doors to fully glazed doors that sort of expand the design concept of openness and letting the outdoors in.
Right.
So, go back and rebirth an old horse that should have gone to the glue factory. Bye.
Did you have any other comments, Lee?
No, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that we're having these discussions.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go down the list that I have, and feel free if you don't have any comments, just say no comment. I just want to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to speak if they'd like to. So the first one I have is Andy Height.
Okay, I have a whole list of stuff, but I'm not going to go through it. I'll actually type it up and then email it in. It's only little stuff like on one of the sections, page 43, and then verses 29, it's mentioned the T111 siding, but it's written two different ways. So I have a bunch of that little stuff, and where it says don't use tinted windows, but then the picture of the house below it or on the next page has like green tinted windows. It's one of the newer edition houses. So little stuff like that. But some of the comments, like on page, I think Lee was mentioning this too, is on page 50, it talks about replace your door with what it was already there. And I know a lot of people like to take the wood doors and then change them to the all glass doors. But from the guidelines, it kind of gets like, am I not allowed to, if I have a wood door, can I keep a wood door? And the same with, don't have what section it was, but it's where like if you redo your kitchen and you want to take a window and make it into a door or change a door into a window and move the window arrangements around, the guidelines for that section, it's in here. So I have it in my notes somewhere. It makes it sound like you can't do that. Like if you have a half window, but you could have a full window, but you can't change it because how it's written. So things like that. There's also page 59, there's talks about the carports and the picture of the I think it's it says it's like one of the original carports for the neighborhood, but I don't think it matches Fairfax County's regulations for carports since it's detached, and might give people the wrong impression that they can do that if it has to be attached now, but back then it. Like on page 73, there's comments about the decking and that it should be all natural wood. But does that mean people can't use Trex? Because I know a lot of people have been using Trex or the manufactured wood. Let me just do quick. And then I'll have to relook at it, but on page 80 is the section about landscaping. And it kind of seemed like it jumped from landscaping to the driveways and parking pads and back to landscaping. So I kind of got confused there. So it's between like page 83 and 87 or 88. I felt like it jumped around, but it might have just been how I read it. But the only other comment I have in there, but I think Bob mentioned this in his email, was about the asphalt driveways. And most of them around here are asphalt. And then actually last thing was, I put a note, page 49, there's talk about the bubble skylights. And when I walked around today, I noticed, at least in the newer section of Hollin Hills, almost every house that has skylights are the bubble skylights, not the newer flat ones. So that might be confusing where it says not to use, I think it was one of the pictures with the red X about skylights. But other than that, I was just looking at my picture to make sure I'm not muted after saying all that. So I think that's all I have. But I'll type up all my other notes. But it's just little stuff about, it talks about this, but then it shows it as a green check, but it just says before it says not to do that. So just little stuff like that I'll put in my notes and then email in.
Thank you. Yeah, those would be appreciated.
And we can certainly take a look at those and make sure the narrative matches the photos. And but those are great comments. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. And on that recommendation, if you could just give general highlights, and if you didn't provide comments to Sarah and Laura and Catherine before, please do so. I'm just on the interest of time and happy to discuss further if need be.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll try to type them up tomorrow and email them in.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Next, I have Bob Kinzer. Find him.
He's taking a walk on the beach.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I made some fairly serious list of detailed comments but I have 3 or 4 comments related to what's already been discussed a bit. And one of them has to do with the sort of trying to make Hollin Hills into a monument or of something like Mount Vernon and preserve it. And it really is a project that's been going on in a continuing sort of basis and being modified with materials that work now, but still trying to make the places look like Hollin Hills. And I think we've done a pretty good job. And that I would like for that to be sort of emphasized in the guidelines if possible, so that it doesn't look like we're trying to just keep replicating with these same materials. We're trying to keep replicating the same houses with modern materials that work better and that you can actually get. And so that's sort of a general comment. The other thing about the porches, which I appreciated Laura's comment, and I didn't understand that a porch that's enclosed in any fashion is an addition. And I think that is absolutely terrific, because you can put on a porch very sloppily and it really messes up a house. But if it's an addition, it has to go to the design review board and it has to go get a permit, which means you'll wind up with a good looking porch and you won't mess up a house. So I think that's terrific. And the other is the differentiation of an addition from the house. I think that they are automatically differentiated just because of the way you have to put them on. But going and trying to make different elements just to make them look different, or giving an architect a free rein to go and really mess up and play with the traditional Hollin Hills design, I think is a bad idea. So I would really encourage you to try to kind of soften that differentiation comments so that it makes us be able to have our additions the way they always have been, which is to make them look as much like a smooth existing or modified house, but it's the same house. It just doesn't have some architect's statements tacked on the side. Okay, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bob. Next up, I have Elise Murray.
Let me get my video to start. I want to say, having sat through a lot of preservation training over the years, that a lot of the stuff in the guideline is what I'm going to refer to kind of rudely as sort of stock preservation language. That if you look at a guideline from, say, Fredericksburg, you'll see similar themes. And I think that these guidelines need to be fine-tuned to better fit with the situation on the ground. And in terms of historic materials, I know your house wasn't built with materials that were considered historic, but because they've been on your house for 70 years, they've become historic. And that's what's intended is to try to replace, which that's what's intended, and it needs to be softened a bit, but it's not that everybody thinks that your warping door absolutely has to stay there. It's that you should try as best you can to replace something like the door. If you have a ton of money, you can go out and get one fabricated, which actually I had one fabricated in Reston. It didn't cost that much. Very similar to your doors. But it's a balancing act between what's practical and what's sort of ideal. And the way the guidelines are written to me now seem like we're kind of tending toward ideal. And I hope people will just take a step back and relax a little and work with a consultant so we can get more to something that works. And that's what I have to say from my background and my years of sitting through training.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you for that clarification on the practical and ideal. I think that's hit the nail on the head, and we'll work on that. Next, I have Jason Zellman.
Thanks, Laura. I don't think I have anything to add that hasn't been said. I think we have a good baseline to work from, and yeah, some fine tuning is necessary, and I think we have time to work that out, but we needed to start somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Next I have Jerry Gibber.
Well, I want to say that I appreciate Barbara's comments and Bob's comments, and I particularly appreciate Elisa's comments as the practical and ideal. I think that's a good. Those are good goals to strive for. I would say what I'm really concerned about is how the Hollin Hills Design Review is going to coordinate with the Fairfax County Design Review. And if the Hollin Hills Review is saying we want certain things that really look like Hollin Hills, and the county guidelines are leaning towards more differentiation, how are those two going to work out when they both, in some cases, have to review the same addition? So how is that going to work? And I do agree with Bob when he says that when you look at the houses, as I drive around and look at the houses, and I drove around recently with Barbara, you can clearly see in almost all cases where the original house is. And so I think when Bob was saying that you can, even if they have the same size windows, you can still differentiate that addition, because it's clear when you look at as many houses as we all look at, you can still see where the original is. So even if there's an addition that has almost the same exact window or the same exact window size, you can still tell what's the addition, and what's the original. So I think working on, how we're coordinating is really going to be important.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll take on the question about how they're going to work together. So the Historic Overlay District design guidelines and review are going to be a completely separate process, of course, from the Design Review Committee of the Civic Association. If the design guidelines get passed and the HOD gets passed, that's a county review level, and it's separate from the individual level. It would be similar to if a deed or covenant had a restriction of a use. I give this example all the time, and I apologize if I sound like a broken record. But for example, if the county allowed home child cares, but the covenants or deed did not allow home child cares, then that would be a private matter between the homeowner and the DRC. If they weren't meeting the county Historic Overlay District regulations and or the ARB recommendations and approval, then that would be a disagreement between the county and the homeowner.
I understand all that, but what if the Hollin Hills Design Review Committee approves one thing and then the county doesn't? Who's going to resolve? You're having the homeowner stuck in the middle of two reviewing entities that may or may not agree. How is that going to be resolved?
And Cherie, if you're still here, Cherie Halyard from the County Attorney's Office, feel free to jump in if you have any more clarifications. But from what I understand, the county process is a completely separate process. If the county approval went forward, it would be incumbent upon the DRC if they had an issue that disagreed with the ARB's approval. So the covenants and deeds and the DRC, if they're more restrictive, would be a private matter. Versus if they did not meet the Historic Overlay District regulations, then it would be versus the county. But I see what you're saying if they don't agree and don't align. However, we do not take the local deeds and covenants into consideration with county reviews because it's a private matter.
So there's going to be a big problem, which has been already alluded to. If the Hollin Hills DRC says we want floor to ceiling windows and we want them to look exactly the same as standard windows, and the county says no, we want half windows or wider so we see a difference, we're going to have a huge problem.
I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I'm just saying that, we've been asked, by the community to come forward and bring these issues forward. And that's the process. The order of the review, thanks Christine for the question. The order of the review would most likely be the Architectural Review Board and then the Civic Association, most likely. But they would have to meet the the difference would be the ARB approval would hinge on the building permit being issued, and that necessarily wouldn't be the case with the Civic Association.
Right.
I'm not saying we've resolved that issue by any way, shape, or means, but yes, that's the probably the most straightforward answer I can give you.
Can I just jump in here? This is Barbara Ward. I think that Jerry brings up a really good question that comes to the nub of this. And I guess what I'd like to hear back from you all is there some reason why you cannot take into account the historical use of the guidelines that the DRC and the community have used for these past 70 years? Why are these not more a part of what you're thinking of? Is because the reason you're here, the reason Hollin Hills still exists the way it does is because of these design guidelines. And I guess what I was a little bit upset about when I got the guidelines was the fact that the guidelines had been drafted without any input from the community. Now, I understand that these are a starting point, and I've tried to tell myself, well, they just threw everything up against the wall and they're going to see what sticks. But I hope one of the things that stick is the 70-year history. I mean, that's part of Hollin Hills, of design decisions that have been made. Have they all been perfect? God, no. I'll raise my hand to that. I've probably made some of the bad ones myself. But by and large, we've done a pretty damn good job. And I don't see any acceptance of those guidelines in your draft. And that's why it brings up the anomaly, the problem that Jerry is identifying, almost frighteningly so for me as I'm sitting here listening to it. Because we can't put the homeowner in the middle of that. And that's exactly where you're going to be. Who do you want to get sued by, the county or your neighbors?
Thank you, Barbara, for bringing that up. As we're charged with looking at the analysis of a historic overlay district, we're looking at it completely independently of the covenant, the deeds, and the existing Civic Association Design Review Committee. We specifically did not look at those because we are completing an independent analysis on what we think staff and traceries, believes are the defining characteristics and also the features that are worthy of being preserving. Not to say that we don't, we're here to gain community input, but we don't have as much insight. We're not going to say we're experts at all of this, but it is a completely separate process. And that's why we're not leaning on the design guidelines of the Design Review Committee. We're not leaning on the Civic Association. This is a completely county-driven process. And we cannot take into account the existing design review committee guidelines. It doesn't solve the problem.
No, because very frankly, that's why Hollin Hills exist. You're ignoring 70 years of history.
But we're taking an independent analysis of what's there, a new lens of what because staff will be making a recommendation on whether or not we believe it merits a historic overlay district or not. And we're doing the analysis separately from that. The design guidelines are the recommendations for how we think to uphold the characteristics of the historic overlay district. But that doesn't mean that we can't take out parts, finesse parts, refine parts, and that we agreed, we had this ready to go in March. Traceries had it ready to go in March, and COVID delayed that process. So it's not that we were intentional on holding these back, but at the same point, we weren't going to give them.
Nobody thinks that. Nobody.
Well, I know, but we also didn't want to give them to you piecemeal. We wanted to give you a complete document to look at as well. So it's not meant to be in any way, it would be what the ARB only would use. It doesn't solve the problem of the disagreement between that and the DRC, but it's a completely separate process.
I understand that I understand that. I guess my question goes a little bit, is there something written that says that the design guidelines or the design of the community, in a way you're ignoring the design of the community, cannot be taken into account in drafting your guidelines? I understand you have to draft your own guidelines, but why is the community history of applying and building not, is there something that prohibits you from taking that into account? Is there some law, rule, regulation, statute that prohibits you from taking a look at those things?
Sherry, are you there?
Yeah,
you're available.
I am.
Hi.
This is Sherry Halliard with the County Attorney's Office. When you look at the enabling authority and the zoning ordinance, there's no language that prohibits what you've said. The ordinance talks about, and I've got it in front of me here, in the establishment of a historical overlay district, the properties have to meet criteria that deal with significant character, interest, or value of the development, heritage, or other characteristics of the property, et cetera, but there's nothing specifically that references, let's say, a separate design guidelines from an HOA or community of that sort. Does that answer the question?
And Sherry, am I correct in drafting county legislation? We do not take into account any community underlying deeds and covenant restrictions in our analysis.
Right. That's not part of the authority given to establish the historical overlay district.
I don't hear anything in what you read that says that you cannot take a broader look. What I don't understand is, where are these, what is the origin of your viewpoint that prohibits your looking more broadly at what this community has done for 70 years, the standards that it has employed for 70 years?
Barbara, I think we understand your point, and I'm going to ask to move on. I'm not going to come to agreement tonight, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to just make sure we get to other people's comments. I think
I'm sorry, I don't want to I don't mean to dominate this, but I think that this is a big issue.
I agree with you. Let us circle back with you and get some more information.
Laura, we do have some comments in the chat.
Okay, let's see. I think I answered Christine, and then Mr. Patrick Kelly said there's been situations in the past few years in which the DRC has asked homeowners to get a county permit before getting the DRC approval. I see the same process occurring with the ARB. So that could be an avenue of how this would move forward. But that's a discussion we can have at a later time too. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Okay, let's see. I think the next one I have on tap was K-Or.
No, I don't have additional comments. Y'all are doing a great job.
Okay, thank you.
Could any of the county commenters or non-commenters identify their role again? I know the people who live in Hollin Hills, and they don't need an introduction to me, but I know you previously introduced the county people, but it doesn't stick with me.
Oh, okay.
An introduction, say who you are and where you belong.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Kay Orr. I'm one of the ARB members, and I'm an architect as well.
Thank you, Kay. All right, next one I have is Mary Tracy. I think I saw her. Let me unmute you, Mary. All right, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm sorry I went down to the meeting, but nobody knew about it outside the building, so I came home, so I missed the first half hour of it. I have gone through some of the stuff fairly quickly. It's still somewhat confusing to me, but I had a couple of comments here. One on the non-conforming houses that you had originally identified the Wilson house on Pickwick Lane, or I don't know, it's Paul Springer Pickwick, but the map shows the house next to it now, so I don't know what happened there. I didn't think it should be a non-conforming. It's the one that had a, I don't know, it's a garage or a storage place in front of it, but I think the rest of the house was okay. My question is, what happens with the houses that are non-conforming? I mean, can they not do anything, or what happens if they want to do something?
Thanks, Mary, for that comment. I was hoping to focus on the design guidelines first, and I do have the discussion about the conforming and non-conforming later on tonight and/or at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'm just trying to.
As I said, I missed the first half hour.
No, that's completely fine. I just want to try to make sure we give the consultants the best use of their time tonight. So.
If I can make a comment about the design things, one of the things that I noticed, sure. As I said, I went through it pretty quickly, but I found it kind of odd that they said that the chimneys couldn't have the metals flashing around the outside, and is that really so terrible?
I'll have to take another look at what specific section that was on.
I'm sorry?
I'll have to take another look at that section, but
well, I mean, as I said, I don't have I have some of my notes, but I can't read some of them because I wrote them down so fast. But they said that they shouldn't have any of the flashing, of the metal flashing around the outside. But I noticed a lot of them do, and I don't see what the problem is. But I think there's some other things that I noted, but I think this has to be thought of fairly carefully. I think Bob Kinzer made some very good comments about it, and we want to get something that people can buy, can support, and that won't make lives totally miserable. Another question that I have in terms of design, I noticed one of the things said, and I know it was in the zoning, and I'd raised it one time previously with Laura, is that the zoning has 35-foot height limit. I think that is totally inappropriate for this, because that's what, the houses are supposed to fit into the landscape, and 35 feet is very, very high. And I think that should be cut down to maybe 26 feet. I mean, even if you put an addition on, it shouldn't overwhelm everything. Thank you. I have more comments. I'll send them in at some point, but.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mary. A question, did you want the 30 for the height limit? Were you looking at more of a restriction on the height as put in the zoning ordinance, or a recommendation on the height? Because that's kind of two different levels that we're looking at.
I think I mean, my problem is that I see if the zoning is, if you can change the other stuff and you can say you can't put on flashing, for example, why can't you put a height limit on? Because I think the idea of these houses fitting into the landscape is terribly, terribly important. And some of the really bad ones that I find offensive are the ones that have gone way too high, and within the zoning limits, so they could say, oh, gee, we're legal. But I think that is something, I think one of the things that was made, that the addition shouldn't overwhelm the original thing. And I think, for example, that the house across from Lee's, where, it's just where the addition totally overwhelms it, I think is not what we should be aiming at. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And just one clarification is, once again, these are design guidelines and recommendations, and there's a separate part for restrictions and regulations that can't be changed, for example. So I think at this point, we're looking to put a recommendation on the height, if that's what you're looking for.
Well, I think that would be, that might be something. I mean, I think that would be important to do, because you don't, I mean, one of the fears that everybody has is these damn mega mansions, and mega mansions are high.
Right. It also is good to note for that is that there's a definition of height in the zoning ordinance of how height is calculated, and Lily might know specifically, and we can table that for another time, but that would also depend on if that would go in the zoning ordinance or not. But I think at this point, from what you kind of described, we're looking at more kind of a recommendation of height.
Sure. Okay.
Instead of
at a minimum.
Because we're saying, because if we put it in the zoning ordinance, it would be a restriction that no house can be over 26 feet in height for any reason. And if you wanted, to amend that in any way, you'd have to get extra dispensation to do so. And I don't think that's what we're looking for. I think we're trying to leave it a little bit flexible, but we do want some probably more recommendations on, or clear recommendations on height. Thank you for that comment.
I think that would be good.
Okay, thank you for that comment.
Laura,
yes.
We have a question from Kay on if the percentage of lot coverage should be included.
That's a good question, and something I would say we would probably defer to, since it's a zoning issue, to move forward. But Kay, let us do some more research into that, and we'll bring it up at the next conversation or the next meeting. Next, I have Mr. McGill.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good. First of all, I want to thank you and Laura and your team and EHT for the hard work you're putting in. And I don't envy you trying to field the conflicting responses you're getting from all of us. And I will certainly be part of that group. Now, I'm going to make fairly extensive comments. I think, first of all, it's important to realize that Hollin Hills was designated as listed on the National Historic Preservation List as a mid-century modern neighborhood, not as a Charles Goodman neighborhood or a Robert Davenport neighborhood. It exhibits mid-century modern architecture. And I appreciate your efforts in these guidelines to be flexible with the kinds of additions that are allowed. And I have several things to suggest. First of all, even in your staff report on page 2, you say the design should be compatible with the scale and appearance of the character of the Hollin Hills community. I think you should change appearance to style, because appearance could mandate slavish conformity to the existing structure. Similarly, on page 38, you say the guidelines strongly encourage preservation, but also support creative, compatible changes. And on page 39, you say it's not to stunt innovative design, nor preserve Hollin Hills as a snapshot in time. Now, beyond that, I find several pieces of the specifics to be problematic. And I'll start with driveways. Now, you say in the design guidelines introduction that Charles Goodman hoped that the streets themselves in Hollin Hills would be gravel streets and not paved. And then he put in gravel driveways. Now, I am sure Charles Goodman understood that as this part of Fairfax County developed, gravel streets would not survive. And indeed, in New Holland Hills, the county made the developer put in curbs and gutters and sidewalks. So it seems to me that saying driveways must be gravel and cannot be paved is a red flag. I cannot imagine trying to shovel snow off a gravel driveway. I have a paved driveway. I think they're neat and tidy and better looking. And I wonder why you would say they've got to stay as gravel driveways. Similarly, the doors. The guidelines identify several different styles of doors that are acceptable. Solid wood, all glass, etc. But they say that any door that's going to be replaced must be replaced with the exactly same door. And if necessary, people need to scrounge around some dump to buy a used door to replace it. Now, that doesn't make sense to me. If there's a mid-century modern style door that's other than the one you have in your house, that's acceptable in the guidelines, why can't people use that door instead? Similarly, on gutters. Now, I chaired the design review committee for 4 years. And when I got there, one of our guidelines was if you are replacing anything in your house that's already there, you can replace it as is unless it's a gutter. And then you must replace it with a box gutter. Now, in the testimony and conversations we had about this issue, they pointed out that OG gutters are prefabricated and very inexpensive. And box gutters, unless your contractor has a special piece of equipment that costs maybe $30,000, must be fabricated on site and are much more expensive than OG gutters. Now, the same guidelines say, well, any gutters or any addition to the roof should be minimal in outline. And I think OG gutters are minimal in outline. At the design review committee, we changed that policy to say if you have an OG gutter and you want to replace it with another OG gutter, that's fine. And I also question this question about the front porches, not the screened-in porch issue, but rather those type 2 Hollin Hills homes that have a recessed entryway with a small porch. And the recessed entryway comes in right by the living room and dining room. Now, many houses have enclosed these recessed entryways. And it seems to me that it doesn't hurt the design of the house if the replacement entrance is compatible with the mid-century modern style. So those are my concerns. I think it's important, per number 9 of the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, that we be flexible and allow creativity as long as we're looking at additions and changes to the houses that are consistent with the mid-century modern look. And they must not demand that Hollin Hills is a snapshot in time that shall never be changed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I do have your written comments, so we'll be sure to review those in detail and come back to you with some responses.
Thank you, Mr. McGill. Next, I have Millie Stanges, and I think you're still at the supervisor's office.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Laura, and your team and the consultants for all the work they've done on this. What struck me is actually what Barbara hit on, as well as Lee and others, and that is, I think there was an expectation by those in the community, not all of us, but some in the community, that were eager to see an HOD come into play, that it would follow DRC guidelines almost to a T. In fact, I even heard them quoted saying, we'll just give those to the county and they can just use our guidelines. I don't think that's the way it works. That's what I've been hearing from you through all our meetings. That's what I read in this document. That's what I know from my own research, is when you have a historic overlay district, there are standards that have to be followed. And they don't take into account anything the community may or may not already have in place. And I appreciate that, and I kind of understood that all along. But I think this document really highlighted it for some, and it became glaringly obvious that it wasn't going to be a rubber stamp by the county. And you're going to be thoughtful as the way you approach it. And I think that's a good idea, because I guess there's an old saying, be careful what you wish for, because these historic guidelines from the Secretary of Interior were designed for truly historic properties like George Washington's home, Old Town Alexandria, and other places like that where they had sturdy, fine materials, not stuff like Barbara talked about and Lee talked about, this cheap stuff. I mean, when there was one objective in building these homes, and that was to build affordable homes quickly. It was post-war, and there was not a lot of quality taken into consideration. So the concerns that have been expressed here are legitimate concerns. And that's why it's kind of a very difficult and delicate balancing act to marry historic overlay guidelines with Hollin Hills and the designs of these homes and the quality and the structure of these homes. And that's been my concern all along. I'm not going to be a broken record and go on. I'm not going to make comments on specific things, because I think the biggest issue is going to be how does the neighborhood and their expectations and the DRC guidelines, how does that marry or be compatible with the historic overlay district imagined guidelines from the ARB. So, but again, thank you for all your efforts in this and everything that's been done so far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Millie. Next we have Ron McCallum.
Okay, just overall, I really like the effort that's been put into the preparation of the guidelines. I like the fact that there are recommendations, and as opposed to very strict language. And I do appreciate the fact that the guidelines are separate from the community's efforts through the DRC, totally separate. I think perhaps, without dwelling on this more than just my comment, that Laura, you may have overstated the case in saying that you cannot take into account specifics in the DRC guidelines. And I will just stop at that point. But let me go back and comment about something that Barbara Ward raised, and that is the use of pictures, specifically in regard to non-contributing properties. One of the things I really, really very much liked about the guidelines is that there were pictures of contributing and non-contributing properties. And I respond very much, very well to the photographic evidence of the ideas that work and those that should not be allowed to be repeated ever again. And without pictures, how are we going to know? Well, how is a new person in the neighborhood going to know when they see a property that is non-conforming, and they don't know it's non-conforming, and they say, oh, I like that particular feature, which all of us think is not a very good feature for a historic property. So how do you do it without the pictures? I understand that the homeowners of the non-contributing properties would certainly be upset to see their property with an X to it, but that's the fact. The only compromise I could see is that instead of photographing the non-contributing, you include a narrative description of the non-conforming property. So that's the end of my comment on that.
Thank you, Ron. I think we
Draw pictures of houses of things that you thought were non-conforming.
I'm sorry, Barbara, I didn't hear the very beginning.
But you draw pictures of, for example, there's a house with a strange second story. Instead of picturing that house of, do not let this happen to you, could we have a picture?
Like an illustrative example.
An illustrative example. That's fine. I sort of am concerned about having pictures of people's homes depicted in that way.
And maybe it's something maybe different than an X and a check, because I don't think it means an absolute no that you shouldn't do this. But I don't know, and I would defer to Sarah and Laura who's on that, because they've done more design guidelines than I have. But maybe it's something like that we come up with, but we'll look further into that. Thank you. We don't want anyone upset about having their house in there as a don't do this. Okay.
Like my chimney house.
Okay. I had Lee was the last one, but she already spoke. So are there any issues that we haven't brought up yet? I know we're way past time, but this is probably the biggest issue for tonight, or the biggest discussion topic for tonight. So I wanted to make sure we gave our consultants some clear comments. So if anyone has anything else that hasn't been brought up yet as an issue, speak of forever hold repeat. No, I'm just kidding.
You're gonna hate me for this. On page 41, you talk about water tables or raised basements are not original features in the neighborhood. However, due to grade changes, many basement or ground levels are partially exposed. Frankly, I talked to a couple of people. Nobody knows what houses you're referring to.
I'll take another look at that. I think the intent behind that was that they weren't prominent design features of the original designs. And to accommodate changes in grade, some of the unit plans might have been adapted to have more prominent water tables or foundations. But let me take another look at that section and make sure it's clarified. But obviously, we're not trying to undo anything that's existing or force changes upon homeowners. So,
and this is not. The conversation tonight is not by any means the end of this conversation, and it's just to get everybody started on this. Barbara, if you have more comments, feel free to send them to myself, and I'll forward them on to Traceries and Sarah and Laura's group. But feel free. I will say I would like to put a kind of deadline on comments so that we can get we could have a hard stop and another draft to you. Sarah and Laura, would you prefer it to be in a week, and then we can do a new draft? But I'm hoping, and we can get to this at timeline at the end, to have another meeting November 2nd if possible. So I'd want to give Traceries some time to either get some more comments in, to have the work group get their final comments from tonight. So if I give everybody till next, what's today, the 19th? Let's see here. If I could give, sorry, that's my son. If I could give everybody till the 26th to get comments in, that's next Monday. And then I'll forward the rest of them to Traceries, and then we'll kind of take a break for a little bit. So anything you said tonight, we'll go back and pull comments together. And Traceries and I will debrief from today. But also, if you had anything that you didn't think of tonight or whatnot, this is not the end of the conversation by any means. And feel free to keep forwarding us those comments. Any final comments on that before we trudge ahead? Okay.
If you said November 2nd, that's one day before the election. I'm just wondering if there might be voters or somebody who wants November 2nd free as well as November 3rd.
The county has a holiday on November 3rd, so I won't be working. But but we can. We could move the date if possible. That's up for discussion. Let's just set the deadline for comments for traceries. And then I'm happy to discuss the tentative next meeting dates. That was one of the issues for tonight.
Yeah, you mentioned November 2nd, which is why I'm responding.
Yes. No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm happy to discuss further. I just want to make sure we have a hard deadline for comments for this first draft, so that we can give traceries and us and staff time to respond to the comments. Okay, thank you, Laura and Sarah. Feel free, and Catherine, feel free to stick around if you'd like. If not, don't feel like you have to. But thank you for presenting and taking comments and discussing this with us tonight. And we'll see you at our next meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Sarah, can you stop sharing your screen? I think I could take it back. Maybe I could take it back. All these, Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Let's see, now I'm going to open my screen. So now we're going to move on to the contributing and non-contributing, and we're not going to get through everyone's tonight, but I'm just going to go through some preliminary comments that I had. And I know, Mary, you brought up another contributing and non-contributing property to take a look at. But just wanted to go through a little bit of our methodology and maps and how we came to our preliminary findings for contributing and non-contributing structures in the district. So let me find my thing that I had up. That's not the right one. Sorry, I had it up. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. See where we are. Where's my map? Okay, so share content. And share my screen. Sorry, everybody. I gotta take it back from Sarah. There we go. Okay. So the first thing you're going to see is the latest map that we have, and you all got this, got a kind of map similar to this in materials for review for tonight. So what you're seeing is, oops, see everybody else there. What you're seeing is our preliminary determinations for contributing and non-contributing properties. So staff, when reviewing the properties, decided to look at the initial National Register nomination that was done and completed, I think it was between 2006 and 2012. And then, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were 14 properties from the National Register nomination that were contributing. And then staff, through further analysis and modifications, staff identified 13 new non-contributing properties. So on this map, the properties that are in pink are the non-contributing properties, and the properties in green are the contributing properties. The ones with the yellow plus mark are the new non-contributing. I have that plus in the wrong place. I'm sorry, it should be up higher. Are the new properties. So thank you, Ron, for telling me I need to work on my pointer procedures. But so these yellow pluses are the ones that we've determined are new non-contributing since the National Register determination. So we have 13 of those. And then we were talking about the map earlier for the additional properties. So you can see here, this is the, oops. Well, I could draw, maybe not draw. Maybe I could, oops, I guess I can't draw on the PowerPoint. But you can see these pink properties on the periphery are the different Park Authority owned properties. So you see where my cursor is here. This is the Hollin Meadows Park. This is additional stormwater. I'm not sorry, not stormwater.
sorry, it's late. Additional parkland, and then the one up here as well as another park. And Barbara brought up the question of these two properties at the very top. Those are part of this park, and we decided to include them just to be cohesive instead of excluding some parcels of the park. If they ever came in for analysis, obviously they wouldn't be very significant if something happened to them. But in total, we have 37 non-contributing properties, and Nicole, Kara, and I worked long and hard on how to make that determination. So I just have some questions we came into when looking at each of these properties when they came in. You know, was the property contributing in the National Register nomination? And then has the property been modified since the National Register nomination? So were there any additions? We looked at building permit, aerials, changes, things like that. Was the modification completed within the period of significance? So since there's a 30-year difference between the first construction and the last construction, and we were looking if there were some that were put on, because we know that some additions were put on by Goodman and others. Then we looked at if the property was modified and had any additions, does it still retain the defining characteristics as determined by staff? And also some input from what the work group or we talked about as contributing features. We've talked about those at length before. And we did that once again by reviewing building permits, aerial photos, and by site visits. We also did some GIS imagery changes over the years and things like that. So then we looked at, and this comes from what we were getting to at the beginning about the Secretary of Interior standards that Traceries brought up, was did the modification diminish the historic integrity of the building according to the Secretary of Interior standards? So was there a new use? Most likely not. Most of them stayed residential. Was there removal of historic or original materials? Does it create a sense of false historic development? Is it too similar to what was already developed? Are the new additions historic in their own right? That goes back to the period of significance. Distinctive features, replacement of historic materials. And then we talked about a lot tonight, the new additions being differentiated from the old. And then another one that came up too that we took into consideration a lot was the new additions can be removed without negatively impacting the historic nature of the house. So that came up a couple times tonight on knowing the additions were additions, because you can see the different heights and the different materials, the structures. So that's what Nicole and Karen and I kind of took into determination of the structures. And this is just defining characteristics, excuse me, as determined by staff, and kind of our checklist of what we felt. If it had these, then we felt that it was contributing. And if it didn't, once again, subjective decision, but came to consensus within our little group. So I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion on this as well. These were the comments I got at the very beginning of properties to look at further. And I know we're not going to get through the clock. It's already 8:22. So I want to make sure that we do end at 9 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through these and maybe discuss these tonight. And if there's additional properties, please send them to me. And then what I'll do is I'll put up a list before the next meeting so that we can talk about, everyone can be aware of the properties we're going to talk about and any additional properties that we want to bring up. So are there any questions before we dive into this? I know I threw a lot at you and we've already exhausted ourselves from the design guidelines discussion, but feel free to chime in. Did I mute everybody? Give me a hands up if we're all still awake. Yay, okay.
Is there a way to get rid of the gray boxes?
Gray boxes where?
There are two huge gray boxes. Am I the only one that's seeing them?
Nope. Let's see.
No, you are not, Jeer.
They're there.
Okay, hold on. Why is, oh, you know what? It's, I bet.
Laura, it appears to be your
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, I can bring up the PowerPoint again if we need to. Sorry about that.
We also have another question, not really a question, but a comment from Patrick Kelly in the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna table that for right now, so we can get the work group. But Kira, if you could note that, and that we'll come back to it.
Sure thing.
Only because it's a paragraph, and I'm not gonna I'm not gonna read it on air. But yeah, Kira, if you could get back to us on our, we'll just note it for further conversation. Does anyone else from the work group or staff have any comments on contributing or non-contributing? Mary, could you clarify for me again your earlier comment about which property you were concerned about? I'm sorry, one more time.
Can you pull up the map again?
Sure. Let's see if I can get it to work.
Yeah. I had it at one point, but then it vanished.
Yeah, no, I'll pull that up and hopefully I can.
It's Wilson House. It's across the park, across Bricklemeyer Park. It's the first house on the other side of Bricklemeyer Park.
Can you guys see that?
It just disappeared. It was there, but it's gone now.
Okay, let's see.
Okay. Okay. Originally, this house. Can you see my arrow?
No, I cannot see your arrow.
Okay. Well, if you go along Paul Spring Road just before it turns right, the just first house to the west of Goodman Park is the Wilson House. And that was before you said that was non-conforming. Now they have non-conform, and I just wondered if that was a mistake because now they have the second house on Pickwick shown as non-conforming. But I just wondered if that was a mistake. I mean,
is this the one you're talking about? The original one you're talking about?
No, the other side. No, those are the ones that surround my house. No, go west. Go west.
Young man, go west, young man. Okay, this one here.
No, you're stuck. No, cross Bricklemeyer Park to the west.
Right. Okay. So there's one green one and then a pink one. Is that?
And the pink one. It used to be the green one. That was the Wilson house that on the.
On the very corner is what you're talking about at Paul
Spring. It's the corner where Paul Spring turns right there, and that was listed as non-conforming before, and I had raised the question about it because it does have. I don't know, it's a garage or sort of a thing in front of it, but I don't think it's bad. And now, but it's not marked anymore, but that second house there, and I don't know why that house is marked as non-conforming.
So this one is the one you said was non-conforming, right? The one in the exact.
That's when you listed originally, when we went through this originally.
Okay, we might have just a mapping error on that one. But
yeah.
I will note. Kara, could you take a note for that for me, please? One on the corner of Pickwick and Paul Spring. Okay.
On the
this one here, yeah.
South side, on the south side, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mary. Were there any other comments?
What were the questions about those little yellow things? I forget.
So the yellow things are the ones that were that staff determined were non-contributing that had changes since the National Register nomination. We added saying they were non-contributing properties.
Oh, so those are new
Those are new non-contributing. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I would also point out that just on Bedford Lane, where all the houses surrounding me are non-conforming, but I would also point out that the house on the south corner of Bedford, I looked at it today, and the windows are really weird. Yeah, I mean, they've really changed those a lot, but I mean, some of these things you call non-conforming, I found, kind of, I think the change has been, and the house next to that one on the south side of Bedford, that one was just redone, and it has the worst damn fence you've ever seen. It blocked everything. Then you also had said, as a non-conforming, you put Bob Citron's house, which is the house at the north corner of Bedford Lane, but it's not marked here. I mean, I frankly don't see any problem with this. It's on the top of his porch, but I don't think it's bad.
Thank you, Mary. Can you make sure everyone, when you're sending these comments to me, any written comments, that you send me the addresses that you're talking about?
I'm sorry, I don't have my book here right now.
No, it's okay. I just we have everything sorted by address, permits and photos and everything like that. So it's very helpful for us. So I'm not gonna be able to comment directly on all of yours, but if you would send me those addresses, we can look into it and bring them up for discussion.
Okay, I'll do that.
I'm going to jump into the first
Millie had a question.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Millie.
Just real quickly, and just an observation, I was doing a lot of research and different sources within Virginia and within the county, and it was my understanding, I was led to believe that the period of significance, which you've identified as 1949 through 1971, when the last section 22 or 23, I guess, was finished. Mm-hmm. That period of significance is called a period of significance, which is the historic period when the houses were built. Some of them were added on to by the original builder, by Goodman, etc. And that any additions after 1971 would automatically make the house non-contributory. And regardless of whether or not they were approved by the DRC or ignored, or the DRC was ignored, or whatever they were. And many of them that we went through this whole process in the working group. There are a lot of them that fall into that outside the period of significance. So you've added more based on what's happened more recently, but I think that almost all of the additions that were made, first of all, wouldn't conform with the rules or the guidelines you've come up with now, or what the HOD would have about it being distinctly different. Many of them are made to blend with the other structure. So I'm just curious, there seem to be some contradictions here and inconsistency. That's what I've noticed.
Thank you for bringing that up. There's no one size fits all in Hollin Hills, as you all know. So those were questions that came up for specific analysis. What I will say, and what I'm trying to do, is if there are specific properties that we disagree on and or want to discuss further, that's why I'm trying to get at those. And I'm happy to discuss methodology with you further. But it's really things that were taken into consideration. And for some of them, we thought that it met it. And for some of them, we thought that it didn't. And it was a judgment call. And we're taking each one individually and specifically. So I understand that they're contradicting. But if we have ones that are specific ones we disagree on, that's where I think we can get into the meat of it. Because I think that if we think that one is definitely contributing and staff disagrees, then we can have those difference of opinions, but we need to make sure which ones those are, if that makes sense. So I'm happy to discuss those further. I know it's very confusing. There's no right answer. But thank you, Millie, for bringing up that comment.
Thank you.
All right, so bear with me while I pull up our little screen of items. So I think the first one that we got was a 7424 Rebecca Drive, and I think that was one of the ones that Barbara had pointed out to me was
I think just an error in mapping. And we will take care of that. I just want to note, Barbara, that we have that on our mapping for mapping changes. And then the next one was 7305 Rebecca Drive. And I know we only had, I know it's already 7:35, so I'm happy to, if we don't make it through discussion on this one, we can keep the discussion going for next time. But as you all know, this is Lee's house, and this is something that was very, I know everybody knows where this house is in the community. Let me just pull up a picture of it for discussion. For better or for worse, some of the days we went out, we had, this is, you know, a while ago now, but we had snow all over the place. So it washes out some of the houses a little bit, so it wasn't the best. But let me share this picture and then we can bring it up for discussion. So I know there's a big difference of opinion on whether or not this house should be contributing or non-contributing to the historic overlay district if passed. But I will say that staff had some very specific comments on it. So let me just, okay, let's see. Okay. So 7305 Rebecca. Okay. So we looked at the different contributing characteristics of the district. And I mean, I can go into what staff felt was there. We looked at the chimney still being present. There's additional brick, there was a change to it. So that was obviously a modification. The windows on the side elevation of the build. I'm sorry, let me share my screen so you can see which house we're talking about. Sorry about that. Because I jumped right into it without thinking. Okay. Lee, this could be your Christmas card. So there have been some modifications to it. Obviously, the roof was a big change, but we also looked at the landscape and the fact the landscaping has remained very similar. It doesn't meet the modern movement roof aspects, but it does still have some retaining features of, it still does retain some features of the Hollin Hills characteristics that we defined. We did say that you could see where the changes were being made. So you could see that they were not original, and that the roof and the height is a little harder to discern. But when you compare it to similar models in the neighborhood, it's very clear that there has been a modification to this house. So that's why we felt that this property was still contributing, because it still retains some of the original features of the house, but that you could also tell that it had been modified. So I'm happy to open it up for discussion on that.
So Laura, can you hear me? This is Mike McGill.
Hi, Mr. McGill. Go ahead.
I've got several concerns about this. First of all, the roof was not part of an addition to the house. It was simply added to the house as is. And the roof is a steeply pitched roof. Now, in your guidelines, you say it should be low rise pitched roofs or flat roofs or butterfly roofs and not steeply pitched roofs. Your guidelines also say that there should not be tall, solid fences along the property line. And if you look to the right of this house, you see a tall, solid fence running the entire length of the property line. Now, this house was originally included in the National Trust listing. But then after that happened, this roof was added and the fence was added. And if this house is viewed as contributing, then it undermines the validity of all the guidelines.
Thank you for your comment. We can, and this is open for discussion, and we did not, make this decision lightly, and we took every house individually. And we felt that this house retained enough of its original defining characteristics that that could still be defined as a Hollin Hills house, even with the modifications. I'm not saying the design guidelines in the future should probably discourage houses like this, but the intent of the historic overlay district is to not modify anything that's already existing. We cannot, go back and modify already things that would potentially violate either future design guidelines and things like that. But that was our justification on this house. Thank you, Mr. McGill. Are there any other comments?
Let me add a couple of more comments.
Sure.
One of the concepts of modern architecture is form follows function. And the Hollin Hills houses emphasize form follows function. Now, what's the function of a house? A house is a box that houses people. The roof is a minor consideration to that house. It's simply a covering of the box. And the problem with a roof of this size is that instead of focusing on the box, it makes you focus on the roof. And the roof is not relevant to form follows function. And you said, well, so that we can't exclude things that have already been done. This was done after the National Trust listing, and it was done after the Design Review Committee issued a stop work order, and the fence was added without coming before the Design Review Committee. So this house is a fundamental violation of the entire design review process.
It's a violation of the Civic Association Design Review Committee process, because it did not come before that. And the National Register nomination and recognition is honorific only, so it does not prohibit changes to the structures. The decision, I understand that there was a lot of back and forth on this, and you don't necessarily have to agree. But I know there will be a majority, a minority opinion from the work group. And if this is something they disagree with staff on significantly, then that would be what would go in that discussion. So there is ample opportunity. We don't have to necessarily agree, but we do have to come to some sort of issue and consensus. So I am happy to take this back for consideration and take you into account your comments. But this is for, for discussion purposes. Did anyone else have any comments on this one? Okay. All right, let's see. I only have one more for tonight, and what time is it? 8:45. We might table it till next time because I want to make sure. Let me see. I think it was from you, Mr. McGill, the additional comments on.
Yeah, I'll dive in here. 1820, next door neighbor to me, 1820 Drury Lane. The list says it's not conforming, and it describes it. And as part of the description, it says it has a carport. There is no carport at 1820.
Yes, you are correct. That was a descriptive error. Yes.
No, it's possible you meant 1819. I think still could be considered contributing, but you might consider it's not contributing. And it has a carport, but not 1820.
You're correct. Yep, that was just a change. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. That's the kind of stuff that we need. Because after looking at 470 some odd properties, there's bound to be errors. So thank you for pointing that out. We'll correct that. So that's all I had for tonight for our discussion. And I will say for this one, if there are any other ones that you notice there's a discrepancy or you disagree with the contributing or non-contributing, to please let me know and we'll bring it up for the next meeting. Obviously, the most of the conversation is going to be about the design guidelines at the next meeting, because that's going to be where I keep saying where the rubber hits the road. but where it needs to be more specific, but this is just as equally as important. So let me go on to the timeline real quick, and just for discussion. And I had the zoning ordinance and the comprehensive plan on the next, if we had time, but I think we're pretty clear on some of that. So let me know if you can see my screen with the timeline and schedule. So I sent, can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tonight's October 19th, and we're at the work group meeting number 8. As Supervisor Stork mentioned earlier, and I did send you all a revised timeline looking out for the next year or so. But we're hoping to have additional work group meetings through the end of this year. So 3 additional ones would be November 2nd, November 16th, and I think it was December 7th. I heard that there was, concern about having it November 2nd, I think. Does the group agree? And we can move the dates. I mean, it's just, those are tentative dates moving forward. Or any large concerns, feel free to pipe in if you had large concerns with those dates.
I would like to postpone the next November meeting and then even the deadline for comments, till October 30th or something, and then maybe a week later or something, because I think we have to do more detailed kind of stuff.
So do you think that we should we could postpone to the 30th for comments and then have the next meeting on November 16th instead of the 2nd?
Something like that would be good, I think.
Okay. And I'm happy and I'm flexible to do whatever, the group would want to do for a more, if we feel like we're just trying to make sure we can wrap up some of our work group meetings by the end of the year. And I was hoping to fit a couple more in, but we can also increase the time of the meetings, even though I know it's a little bit long. Maybe we can increase it from 6 to 9 or something like that. So if we do have additional times, or we can just analyze it at the end of every meeting to see if we need more time. I was anticipating we'd need a couple more meetings.
Okay.
Any general consensus?
I don't see why I can't leave them where you have them myself.
Do we want more time to review some of the documents? I mean, that's the main concern for me. If we need more time to review the documents, then I want to make sure everybody has more time. But I also don't want to postpone it too long, because I want to make sure that we're making, this is kind of,
yeah.
If
you move everything 2 weeks, you're really pushing it down the road quite far.
Right, and that was the hope, was to have the committee meeting in January, February, and we want to make sure, though, before we do that, that we have the support of the work group on some of these things. You don't necessarily, like I said, we don't have to agree, but we have to make sure we know what the issues are to bring forth to the community.
The 26th is pretty far from now. So you can only review so much.
The 26th, a week to review, October 26th for a week to review. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you think we can keep the November 2nd meeting?
He obviously doesn't have much time to do it.
Yeah.
I'm good with the 2nd.
Okay, well, let's keep the 2nd meeting, and Mary, I'm happy to work with you if we need more time on some of this stuff. Like I said, this is not, even when we finish our work group meetings on these issues, it does not mean that there can't be anything further considered. This is going to be an open process until we're done with the staff report, and after that, because the ARB is the one approving the design guidelines, not the Board of Supervisors. So we have ample time to go through and to clear up these discrepancies and issues. Okay, so I'm going to keep the November 2nd meeting, and let me know if you need something further from me to help facilitate that. And then the other 2 meetings I have was on the 16th or the 7th. So if you could just keep those tentatively in your schedule, and if something else pops up, we'll work with it then. Okay, so Supervisor Stork mentioned the community meeting hopefully in January or February, early February, and then moving forward on the completion of staff report and the draft design guidelines publication. That would be the draft design guidelines, and that's going to be published. Some version of the draft design guidelines need to be
published with the staff report because they are documents that depend on each other. They don't have to be finalized, but we have to be in some sort of some place to move forward with comments and concerns identified. And that would be when the minority and majority opinions of the work group would be needed at that point. And then in July of 2021, we're looking at the Board of Supervisors zoning ordinance authorization hearing. And that's the thing that's driving all of our deadlines and timelines. And so we have to have drafts due 8 to 12 weeks before and things to run through all of our internal review. So that's why we're looking at the March and April for the finalizing of comments to go into the staff report and the staff report and the staff to be starting to wrap up their writing of it. And then the Supervisor Stork mentioned the outreach to the community, and we're looking at doing that in the summer after the staff report was completed. That doesn't mean that things can't be changed with that, but we need to be able to give them a comprehensive view of everything that we're reviewing so that they can make an accurate analysis of whether or not they support or are against the historic overlay district.
I have a question about the July meeting because there's no public comment there. Are they going to take any decisions there?
And I'll defer to Lily on that. Lily, I can try to answer. Feel free to jump in. But basically what this is it's an authorization hearing. So it's very similar to when the supervisor authorized staff to start looking at the study. We have to authorize it at different parts. But because there's a change to the zoning ordinance, this is the timeline that we have to meet. So the zoning ordinance amendment will go forward on that date, and there won't be. And Lily, is there? I don't think there's public comment at that one.
There is no public comment at that time. The Board of Supervisors will basically authorize the public hearing dates for the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors public hearing. But the staff report would have been done and it would have been published prior to the authorization hearing. It's not a public hearing, it's just a hearing where they basically authorize the 2 dates for the actual public hearings.
It's a very administrative piece of this. And then if we didn't do the zoning ordinance amendment, then we'd have a very much more looser timeline than this. But because it's part of the zoning ordinance is being changed, that's the process that we're kind of working with.
That's correct. I would add, I would say this though, the Board of Supervisors do regularly get comments on proposed zoning ordinance amendments or at the, written comments and emails can be submitted, but the public hearing will not be held on that day. The comments can be sent to the Board of Supervisors office directly and they can consider it when the public hearing is held. But basically, this is for us to go ahead and advertise the public hearing dates on the newspaper and online as required by code.
I do have a question. Laura?
Yes.
Just one quick question. I noticed that you're proposing the staff report be complete in March, April timeframe. When would the working group see the draft?
The working group would see the draft. The working group is not going to see the draft. They're going to be informing the draft and informing your decisions. And then you would be writing your majority and minority report based on our conversations. You're not going to get we don't release the draft to the working group.
Oh, I see. And so you would write the minority and majority comments from the working group, or they?
No, the working group, you all will be writing them. And they would be attached to the draft.
Attached to, but not part of.
Yeah. They would be attached to the staff report, basically outlining the differences. And in my staff report to you, I'll be outlining the differences of, things that we didn't agree on. But that's, for consideration. And then the board members and planning commission would take into account the differences and make their decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. There's the, I will say too, Millie, there's recommendations about the boundaries that we have to make and things like that. And that's something the work group can respond to each of, but you're going to see basically the final versions of all of our findings before, you're not going to see the report, but you will see final versions of all of our findings.
Thank you.
A lot of the report's just background, to be honest. Are there any other comments for tonight? It's about 8:55. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer if anyone wanted to talk further, but I do appreciate your comments tonight. I know that this is a very sensitive issue, and traceries and myself and staff are working very diligently to take all these items into account. And please know that we are aware of the personal nature of these comments and concerns coming forward. And thank you for working with us on these and putting your opinions and comments out there. And that's what we're here for, is to field those comments and concerns. But I will say that the design guidelines are the main kind of meat of what will be impacting the community. So, and heard loud and clear your comments and concerns for getting those where they need to be before moving forward. All right, if that's it, thank you very much. Just a reminder, if you could have comments to me by the 26th, Mary, if you need more time, that's perfectly fine. But just for in the next meeting's discussion, and then the next time I will see you is on November 2nd. So everyone, please stay safe, and please let myself know if you have any questions. Oh, and just an administrative note, Nicole is now working on another historic overlay district, so she's not on this project anymore. So she's doing Homes Run Acres. So just please email me, or you can email Kira or Lily as well, and we'll help field your questions. But thank you all for participating remotely and in person, and we'll see you all again on the 2nd.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Oops.
Thanks, Lily. I forgot to say thank you to staff. You're muted, but I saw you say thank you back.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.